Welcome back to the channel. I'm Scott DIY and this is plastering my kitchen. I've got to get this on quick. Doing the ceilings really gets your shoulders, man. Oh, this is really not going very well, is it? This is probably one of the worst parts about living in a renovation. When you're living in a house, obviously all of your items, clothing, plates, dishes, cutlery, everything is just lying around. And when you have to do a big job like plastering the walls, you have to move it all out of the way. Now, if this was a normal house renovation and you did it all really quickly and you didn't have to wait around months at a time like I'm doing, then you probably wouldn't have put everything back in the room to begin with. It would have been built, like the extension would have been built, plasterboarded, then plastered. However, because I'm doing it all myself, it just takes so much longer because you've just filled the room full of, like I've got an oven, I've got an electric hob that we've been using for the time being. I've got all the plates, the cutlery, all that type of stuff. And even in this corner, which is now empty, I had a whole pantry full of food, dishes, condiments, you name it. So if you're doing your own home renovation, that is something that's going to be causing you a little bit of pain. But that said, at least we're making some progress. So the room is actually getting pretty much empty right now, and I've got a few little jobs left to do. Like I've got to put this fiber tape over these gaps, and I've bought this stuff. This is quite narrow and it's white. The thing is, with white you can't really see where you've taped very well, so I also bought this as well. This is 100mm fiber tape. Oh no, it's 100mm fiber tape. It's extra sticky. I think I'll be putting that on the ceiling because we don't want any issues with the ceiling. And there's a lot of taping to be done, and I'm starting the plastering tomorrow, so I'm just gonna have to get on with it. I've always thought this fiber tape isn't really as sticky as it should be, or as it could be. It just feels a little bit like it's gonna come undone. Do you know what I mean? Apparently that's what people do. They put tape over the top of the metal beading as well. So there's a lot of taping to be done. I just hope I've got enough. Bits where you have to remove some plaster. You don't want any bumps. It's just going to make plastering more difficult. There's actually a lot that goes into prepping a room for plasterboarding. And the only thing I can really compare it to is if you're spray painting. I don't know if anyone's done any spray painting, but you literally have to do so much prep when you're spray painting. And that's where the quality of the work comes in. If you do a good job, if you want to do a good job, you have to do a lot of prep. It's about 3 o'clock in the afternoon when I'm doing this, and I just know for a fact I'm not going to be able to get the whole room done. So I'm going to focus on the areas that we're likely to tackle tomorrow, and then just basically hope that we don't do loads of plastering. And if we do, I'll just have to do a little bit more joint taping. So this apparently is the stuff. So it's extra sticky. It's orange, so you can see it really clearly when it's on the wall, so you know where you've done. And it's massive. So it's 100mm wide, which means when you've got a gap like that, it's much easier to get into that space and make sure that it's all covered. Wow, this stuff is sticky. So as you can see behind me and all around the room, it's all plasterboarded. I've got the edge beads in. I'm halfway through scrim taping up all the joints. And to be honest, I'm excited to give this a go. I've had very limited experience in plastering, no formal training or anything like that, but I'm gonna give it a go. And I'm actually gonna start on the biggest wall in the kitchen, the one that's behind me. It also reaches up into the extension ceiling. So we've got a lot of plaster to get on very quickly. It's gonna be fun, let's put it that way. And hopefully we can get a nice flat surface, and because the boards have been on for a long time, hopefully the plaster won't go off too quick. So before we fully get into the project, I'm just going to go over some of the tools, materials, and the size of this room, and just kind of the process about how I'm going to go about applying this plaster onto the plasterboard behind me. So to begin with, the tools. I've got some refiner tools. Some people call this refiner. I've been sent these by Refiner, and I can tell already that they are really top quality, high spec tools that are going to help me do a better job. I have had a practice go with these on a wall in my bedroom that needed a skim, and to be honest, it's come out really well. But skimming a wall and plastering a whole kitchen is very different. Anyway, so we've got this trowel. I think the most interesting tool that we could be using is this spatula from Refiner or Refiner. I'm not sure if it's refined. Yes, it's called a roll spatula, and it's designed that you can put your hands on this part and just basically run it down the wall whilst the plaster is wet, and it gives you a nice flat surface. This is actually a plastic blade, and it's called the X Skim. This is going to be really useful, especially as a DIYer. So we've got that, and we've got the trowels, and that's obviously first application and second application. Spatula to flatten it all off, and then I have another trowel which is a little bit thinner, a bit more flexible, which then will be for kind of like leveling it all off, getting rid of lines, and just basically making it nice and smooth and flat. So those are the tools. The plaster that we're using is multi-finish. So there is two types of plaster that you might want to put on a board like this, and one is multi-finish and the other is board finish. I've chosen multi-finish because apparently that gives you more time. And as a DIYer who's probably going to be a lot slower than a plasterer, time is very important so that it's not going off too quick whilst I'm trying to work with it. I have bought a sachet of more time, which is basically you add it to your mix, and it just allows the plaster to set a lot slower, which gives you a lot more working time. So there is that safety blanket if we find that the plaster's going off too quick. I have only got one sachet, so I might have to nip out and get another one if we definitely do need it. So we've got tools, we've got plaster. The room itself is roughly 5 meters by 5 meters. The wall behind me, which is the one we're first going to start on, is 4.2 meters. But as you can see, it's quite high. We've got the full height of the ceiling there, and I've got the extension as well. So that all has to be done as one wall, and we've got to go up high, and we've got to go around that beam. For a DIYer, that's going to be tricky, and hopefully we can just make something work. I'm just kind of praying for the best outcome really there. So let's get into it. Let's start. First of all, let's make sure we've got all the scrim tape on, and we'll eventually just be able to start making a mix and getting some on the wall. And I'm just going to talk through the process as I go, and hopefully we'll make a good job.
But before any plastering can be done, I needed to dig out the cables that I put in for the wall lights. I had made some extensive notes about where these cables exactly were in the wall, but as always, my partner changed her mind how high she wanted these lights to be, so we had to make some small adjustments before we could start plastering. This part of the wall is sat on battens. I only had to use a hole cutter and then pull the cable through. I was very apprehensive about using the hole cutter because anyone that's done this type of job before, you're very much worried about nicking the cable with the hole cutter, which would then mean a whole electrical repair that nobody wants.
Right, so I just had to spend a little bit of time getting these lighting cables through the wall. Previously, I'd put these in place so I could just drill into the wall and pull it through, but my partner, Nicole, wanted me to move them higher than originally planned. So when I drilled this one behind me, and it just so happened that I'd put some plaster adhesive right over the top of the cable, which meant I had to dig more of the plasterboard out and basically just make a patch repair. Anyway, we've got the lighting cables through. We've scrim taped up all of the wall, and Reese, my father-in-law, is here. Basically, we're working together because it's going to make this a lot easier with timings. It's a warm day today, so we've got to make sure that we're quick. And we're going to make a mix of the first mix of plaster and we're just going to start at the top left corner and work across and just give it our best shot. Wish me luck.
It really can't be emphasised enough how important it is to get that mix of plaster just right. And the worst thing about being a DIYer, and especially doing this for the first time, is you've got no experience of what just right is. And the only way you can work it out is trial and error, and try and match it to a video that you've seen online.
I think that could be okay. I think that could be okay. So let's have a closer look at this mix. To me, that looks about right. Maybe a touch thick, maybe a little bit. But I know that if I go with that, at least it's not going to be slopping all over the walls, all over the floors even. Trowel's over the other side of the room, as it should be.
As it would be.
Ah, this is very different to how I did it before.
What do you mean?
Like in terms of the plaster itself is a lot harder than when I last did this.
Stiffer.
Yeah, in a good way.
That's what you've had it way too thin on the upstairs.
Well, that's why it was probably slopping everywhere.
Probably why it's falling very well over the house.
So this is the first coat, which I've seen people refer to as the first pass. It's basically getting your material on the wall as quick as possible, trying to keep it nice and level and not worrying too much about the lines. The fact is, I think we did make this mix of plaster a bit too stiff, because halfway through I started to realise that the plaster was setting. It was a warm day, the plaster was too stiff, and I just wasn't applying it fast enough. So I got to a point halfway and thought, wow, I need to get this on the wall really quick or we're going to be in trouble.
You know, I was told not to do this job, this plastering, when the weather's nice, and this morning it was completely overcast. But now, typically, it's come out sunny. So it's a hot day, the first coat's just gone on, and now I need to just start basically getting the second coat on because it's already going tacky. Reese is outside making the mix. We're just going to get that mix in, start putting the second coat on. I'm going to use the more flexible trowel this time, and hopefully we can get it on the wall nice and quick and then get it all leveled off with the X skim. So let's see how it goes. Oh, digging in. It's like purposeful movements. If you start panicking and just like not thinking about what you're doing with your trowel and just slapping it on, that's when you're probably going to get your mistakes, I think. You're going to need about a 5-hour break after this. It's a problem-free philosophy. We haven't got enough, have we?
This wall.
I don't think we've got enough.
And this is where I really started panicking. I was worried that we didn't have enough plaster left in the bucket to finish this wall on the second coat. If that was the case, then we would have 2 different plasters drying at 2 different times, which you can guarantee would look terrible. Luckily, we did manage to make it to the end. I wasn't scrimping on any plaster, but we still managed to cover the whole wall, and we literally had no plaster left in the bucket. We are working to a budget and we were conscious about trying to reduce the amount of waste plaster we were producing, but that is cutting it a little bit too close for me. If you're planning on buying any new tools for your plastering project, I cannot recommend the X-Skim more. I would even go as far to say that as a DIYer, I don't think I would have been able to do this project without it. After using Refiner's X-Skim to get the wall nice and flat, I used the Plastering trowel to get it really smooth. The professionals don't really use tools like this, and I understand why. The Plastering is so soft that it'll go into any bumps and crevices, which means it does nothing to flatten the wall off. It only removes lines, but the problem is it can make the wall a bit too shiny.
Second coat done, and I've just gone over it with the X-Skim, which has made it really nice and flat, and then I went over it with the Plastering trowel just to smooth off any of the lines. It's looking really good. I mean, considering this is the second wall I've ever plastered, the first one being like a small wall upstairs in the bedroom, this is a huge wall. So just over 4 meters long, with a ceiling here of probably above 4 meters at the highest point. I've just done all those processes. I think I'm 4 processes in, 1 more left. I need to wait for it to go a lot harder, and that'll probably take about 30 minutes because it's warm weather. In that 30 minutes, we're just going to clear up, have a coffee, and then I'm going to get the trowel again. So I'm going to get this stainless steel flexible trowel and just flick some water on, and then just go over it basically and get out any imperfections that I can find. And then finally, to finish off, I'm just going to get a paintbrush around the edges just to neaten those up so that it doesn't impact any of the other walls when we come to plaster them as well. So far, it's going great. So as the day goes on, we're getting more and more done. As you can see behind me, we're on the other side of the room now, and we've started plastering 2 other walls at the same time because we're getting really confident. We've got the first coat on here, and then we're just going to basically get the second coat on. I'm not used to plastering, but I can remember doing the rendering outside on the extension, which is one of my previous YouTube videos, and that got your shoulders. This is starting to get my shoulders a little bit now, just because I'm not used to it. But I'm going to crack on. This is very tacky now, and it's almost starting to go dry in places as well, which is almost going past the point of putting the second coat on. So I need to get this on quick.
Just another day plastering.
Just another day.
Another day, no dollar. Can you see the difference in the next?
Yeah, this one's way worse.
No, seriously.
Yeah.
No, in terms of the
I'm not joking, this is not as good. We need it wetter.
Do you think so?
Yeah.
If you've watched any of my other vlogs, you'll see that I'm working alone a lot. So for once, it's really nice to have somebody else with me that I can have a laugh with. It makes the day go a lot quicker, and they can help with some big lifts or a lot of mixing in this case.
Just keep doing that. When you hear that noise you've got it. Got your stones up. A good job he's wallpapering this.
I'll do one better than that. I'm cladding this in wood.
You see, it's cabinets getting in front of everything. The only thing you plaster you'll be able to see around the door.
It's done. So we've got the 5 passes done on the wall behind me, and it's now super flat. We've also attempted to do some on the other side of the room as well. I think it's about 4 o'clock now. So we started at 10, maybe 9:30, finished at 4. We've cleaned up as well, and we've got 2 walls done. We could have started earlier, we could finish later, but we're going to tackle this tomorrow as well. Don't want to wear ourselves out too much, and we're just going to go for it tomorrow. I think what I'd like to do is I want to start on the ceiling, in the big ceiling, because I feel like that's probably going to be the hardest job tomorrow. So we might as well get that done first. And plus they do say to plaster the ceiling before doing the walls, because you can get plaster splattered all over the walls. So yeah, tomorrow, new day, Day 2 of the plastering of the kitchen, ceiling first. See you then. Day 2, that's 4. Day 2 of the plastering. The walls have pretty much gone off. Like, we've had the windows open most of the day yesterday, and we've had them open this morning. They're drying out really nice. The next step is to do the ceiling, like I said last night. But instead of tackling the big ceiling over there first, we're going to tackle the little one, which is just there, because I feel like when you're doing a smaller area, we're going to be able to just play around with it a bit more. We've got a little bit more time. If anything goes wrong, which I don't think it will, then we'll be able to play around with it more. I still haven't used any extra time, but we're going to give this a go. Reese is outside currently making a mix. I've got to throw a sheet over everything and just make sure we're ready to go. So let's get to it. So he starts here, doesn't he?
Yeah, bring it all the way back.
And then pushes it into the corner.
As you can see, my plastering the ceiling technique needs a lot of work. But what can you expect? This is the very first time I've ever tried to put plaster on a ceiling. Before doing this, I spent a lot of time researching mainly YouTube videos of other professional plasterers like On the Trowel and how they apply the plaster to the ceiling and the process they use for working around the walls. One thing I wish I had done, which I've seen a lot of plasterers do since, is plaster over the joint lines first, covering that fibre tape. For me, it felt like it was those areas that would create the most issues. At the time of doing this job, I was really happy with the outcome of the first coat, but it's only watching the footage back that I realised I could have spent a little bit more time trying to get the ceiling more flat on that first coat. As a result, the second coat was a little bit more tricky to apply because I was going over the lumps and bumps that I'd left from the first coat. And if you know anything about plastering, you don't want to be picking up any of the more dry plaster that's underneath into your second coat because that's going to cause lots of lines and it's just hard for that to work out. I did get through it though. I worked super quick because it was still a warm day, but my neck and shoulders were aching a lot after this.
X-skim time. Let's do it. So you're supposed to go all the way across in one motion. We're not going to be able to do that with these lights in the way, unfortunately. Doing the ceilings really gets your shoulders, man. Way more so than the walls. Although maybe because my shoulders are tired from the walls yesterday, that's why it's hurting more, I don't know.
Massive respect to any plasterers that brave it out until their body is used to doing this type of work.
The ceiling is done. So I've done the first, second coat, I've done the X-skim, and then I waited quite a long time because I think there's a difference in drying time between the fireboard and the plasterboard. So I had to wait a really long time before I could get the trowel out again and just get rid of any of those little lines and any of the hollows. That last bit has taken a long time. I think I've spent about an hour trying to get it really smooth, no lines, no hollows, and I can really feel it in my shoulders. So that means I'm definitely not attempting the big ceiling today, but I will do some more walls. So far, it's looking amazing, but I'm only really going to be able to see what it looks like the real final outcome, when it's dry. So I'm going to get some lunch. It's a sunny day, sit outside, eat some lunch, and then tackle some more walls, which should be a lot easier than the ceiling. So that's day 2 done, and I'm once again absolutely covered in plaster. I want to just talk you through the process that has worked really well for me on this plastering. So to start with, obviously you've got your hard trowel. So it's the stiffest trowel in the bag, and you're putting the plaster on nice and thick, very quick, and it doesn't matter about all the lines. That much is pretty obvious. And then you're waiting until you kind of want to get that roughly flat, and then you're waiting for that to go a little bit tacky, and that's the point where you start making your second mix up. And I make the second mix to the same consistency as the first one. No more runny, no more thicker, just the same. I get the second trowel, which is a little bit more flexible, still metal, and that is the rose gold coloured Raffina trowel. And then use that to then get the second coat onto the wall. Again, I'm putting that on quite quick, and there will be some lines as I go through it. I'm just literally getting it on the wall. And then just as I've got it on the wall, straight away, I kind of just go over, make sure it's nice and flat, and just kind of get as many lines out as I can without getting too obsessive, and just kind of getting it roughly right. There's definitely still lines left in there, but I've tried to get rid of most of the hollows and the uneven surface. I let that go off just for a little bit. I let that dry out just a little bit until it's not tacky anymore, but it's gone a little bit past tacky, but it's not hard. And that's the time when I get the trowel out again, that second trowel, the little bit more flexible metal one, and go over it, and that's the point where you can get all the lines out of it and you can get it really nice and smooth. The real tip is I've found is not to panic. You know, you can really go slow with this, and if you're not doing too big of areas or too many areas at one time, you have got the time to work with it. I'm doing this on a warm day and I'm using no extra time in the bucket. So yeah, you're working those lines out with that second trowel. If you're on a big wall and you notice that it is quite out, you can use the X skim, which I haven't got here, but it's the big long spatula at that point to literally just run over the whole wall, and that will take off any of the high spots. You can use that X skim a little bit earlier on, so whilst it's still tacky after that second coat, you can go over it with the X skim. That'll take off a lot of material, but it will give a nice flat surface. So it depends how well you've plastered it in the first place. And then you let it go really hard, and that's the point where you can flick it with a brush, flick some water on the surface, and then you can literally get the second trowel out again and just go over it and just keep going over it until you've got something that you think is absolutely perfect. That's like your last chance. So for me, that's what's been working. That is the end of day 2. There's still quite a few walls left to do and a big ceiling. A little bit apprehensive about the ceiling just because my shoulders are aching today, but I'm taking a day off tomorrow to be with the family because I've worked all weekend. If you've enjoyed this video and you've enjoyed watching me try plastering for the first time, definitely like and subscribe. Helps make me more videos like this, and make sure you tune in for the next 2 days of this plastering job, which should finish the kitchen and you get to see the full reveal. Until that time, see you then, guys.